Should you buy Watch Dogs 2 in 2021? Watch Dogs 2 released about 5 years ago and was a sequel to a game that many considered disappointing, gloomy, and boring. Although I don't share the same sentiments that many had, as I personally thought the original Watch Dogs was incredible, but due to all the backlash from people that played the original Watch Dogs, Ubisoft really did flip a coin when developing this game, and instead of playing in a dim, gloomy, and dark Chicago, Ubisoft changes the formula to a vibrant, colorful, and charming San Francisco location, which in turn made the world, characters, and even protagonists a lot more uplifting and light-hearted. And overall, the game was a polar opposite of the original game. With all that being said though, is Watch Dogs 2 worth it in 2021? Of course, there will be no spoilers in this video for the game's main story. I will just be going over the story's main premise and the basic points that build it up into the awesome and simplistic story that it is. You play as a hacker, of course, who is the protagonist, Marcus Holloway. He's accused of a crime that he hadn't even committed due to him being a possible suspect for the crime, and he takes the fight to them to reveal the corruption of the program behind the system. Soon after this occurs, he's put through a trial by the small hacker group DedSec to erase his digital shadow in a Bloom's server farm, and while inside he realizes how much data is being collected by the system about everyone in Silicon Valley, not just him. The story then begins to follow the main premise of the first game, while of course still being entirely distinct, with the system of CTOS 2.0 being installed across the United States, collecting data on all who were using the system for the purpose of security, something that it entirely didn't provide to its users. Marcus and DedSec's mission is to reveal the corruption behind the CTOS 2.0 system by the CTO of the Bloom Corporation, the annoying and idiotic Doosan, who could be considered the antagonist of the game. DedSec's members, who are inspired by the works of the infamous T-Bone and Aiden Pierce, are determined to be the hacker group that takes the fight to the enemy and reveal the corruption behind all of Silicon Valley's giant tech companies. The characters in the game are much more light-hearted and humorous, sometimes, than those that were featured in the gloomy and dark Chicago, and the characters have been well crafted to be likable and really fun to interact with, and I really enjoy the dialogue and cheesy conversations that are offered to you with all other major characters in the game, and it all really added another layer to the major change of tone that this game had over its predecessor. And this game in its story as well isn't a dark and horrendous revenge story. Instead, it's about a bunch of sometimes idiot group of hackers who do all they can to expose the lies and corruption behind the invading system of CTOS 2.0. The gameplay of Watch Dogs 2 arguably the game's main factor, just like it was supposed to be in the first game. You're a damn hacker, which means you can do whatever the hell you want. Firstly, the game's open world, of course being set in San Francisco, is absolutely stunning, vibrant, and is generally full of color. The map is gigantic, it expands to a few different islands that you can traverse, and each one is utilized in an equal sense in the game's main story. So you won't really be missing out on any of them, and instead, you'll be able to experience each one to its fullest. The world feels alive, and not many open worlds can create such a feeling, but Watch Dogs 2 is one game that is able to fantastically concoct that feeling, and it does it well, with people always bustling the streets, cars all over the roads and highways in the game, and it just gives a general vibe which makes you feel that the city is really lived in, and that if you were taken out of the equation in the game's world, the world will still remain and nothing drastic will change. A feeling that I really appreciate in open worlds that are able to do it properly, such as Red Dead Redemption 2, GTA 5, and of course this game as well. There is also gangs on the different streets in the game which control different territories within the game, and you can wage war with each one, which isn't exactly the best choice as they do call reinforcements quite often, but it's just another factor in the game's world that adds to the overall immersion and the landscape of San Francisco, making it more authentic and more lived in. The new protagonist, Marcus, also feels a lot more agile than that of Aiden Pierce, with parkour traversal being prevalent sometimes, and it just runs and feels a lot better to play than the clunky and sometimes irritating to play Aiden Pierce. And the game did well to give Marcus that sense of flow that Aiden didn't have, and it just makes getting around the world a lot more fun and enjoyable to do. All hacks from the previous game have also returned, with of course the addition of new and more in-depth hacks called contextual hacks. When the player activates their hacker view, known as the NetHack view, instead of the first game's on-screen display window, the entire screen morphs into a sort of hacking view, which outlines the civilians, cars, and any hacking opportunities that you are able to utilize in your hacking vicinity. The hack hacking in this game is easily 10 times better than the original game, and I saw myself utilizing it more and generally having a lot more fun than I did with it in the first game, not just because of the sheer amount of improvements and additions to the hacking abilities, but just to the way that Aiden plays in comparison to Marcus. For example, Marcus is able to hack a civilian and make it so they were framed for murder, which will see the police come and get them. This can be utilized in many different situations, especially when you don't want to get your hands all dirty. This hacking ability is a good way to distract your foes and just waltz into the area unseen, making the hacking a lot more specialized for that of stealth. The abundance of different hacking abilities, from controlling cars on the road while on a big police chase to blowing up holes on the roads to slow down any gang cars that are chasing you, the variety and diversity of these different abilities is awesome and just makes the gameplay a lot more better than that of the first game. And overall, I just really enjoyed the hacking mechanics of this game and saw myself utilizing it a lot more. Now for the actual combat of the game. Of course, because Aiden Pierce was obsessed with the idea of revenge, this meant that he didn't really care for the lives that were in his way to getting his ultimate revenge. So he would of course use a variety of pistols, machine guns, rifles, and shotguns. So basically he was a mass murderer. Well, flip the coin on that combat gameplay, as Marcus canonically plays as a non-lethal character, and arguably this is the ultimate way to approach the combat in this game, as you use your taser that you would have acquired from the very start of the game, as well as your whip, melee weapon, which will both help you knock out enemies slowly in a stealth fashion, or if you are more in a rush, then storming a building with your taser and melee weapon can also work in some scenarios. Although this game highly encourages and recommends that you play in a non-lethal style, it doesn't stop you from being a mass murderer if you really want to. But if you really want to derive the full experience of the game's combat, this definitely ain't the way to go in my opinion. Using Marcus's hacking abilities to distract enemies, using the taser to knock them out for a specified duration, and also silently knocking them out with his melee weapon is just the best way to play the game in my opinion, and I highly recommend you play like this. Marcus also has two gadgets, being his quadcopter and an RC jumper, which can be utilized anytime in any place, and with them you are able to hack objects that you aren't normally to be able to reach with Marcus's phone, and they're just generally a lot of fun to play with in terms of hacking while in a hostile area. The parkour in this game, like mentioned previously, is drastically different than the clunky one featured in the first game, and now the player is able to traverse the obstacles and surroundings a lot faster, and the movement just around the environments within the game is just a lot more fluid than it was in the first game. The AI is also quite good at times, and they have had a huge overhaul, especially to the police and gang AI, who are a lot more alert and smarter than they were in the first game, even being able to shut down the CTOS system for a time to stop you from hacking everything around them. Overall, Watch Dogs 2 is a brilliant game, and the different approach it took was for the better, and it ultimately served as a leap forward for the series in general, and I really enjoyed almost every aspect of this game, and it was a drastic improvement to the first Watch Dogs. So yes, Watch Dogs 2 is worth it in 2021, and if you haven't already picked it up, it's quite cheap across all platforms, and I highly recommend you check it out. If you enjoyed this video, a sub would be much appreciated, and let me know what you think about the game down below. Anyway, that's all from me for today. Peace.